The next presentation is Lyme Sewer Referendum Project Update. Is Richard Pendergast. He's an industrial engineer with a focus of electronics, 23 years of business development experience, started in Lyme on a task force to evaluate the need for sewers and reform the WPCA, became the chair of the WPCA in 2016, and most recently completed a referendum to install sewers in a portion of Lyme. Richard?
So while I read the history, or you can read the history of it, I'll do little acknowledgments with this project. One, the WPCA members, obviously you probably know this, are volunteers, and we happen to have a very good membership. We have a civil engineer, we have a plumber, we have a constructor, we have a professional engineer, we have a professional educator, we have an industrial engineer. We have very good debates, we have pretty good arguments, and I think it leads us to finding the best solutions we could for our town. I'd also like to thank our chosen engineering group, Wood and Curran, for giving us advice and helping us filling out the documents we need to fill out, as well as what possibilities we could do to come up with solutions for our town. I'd like to thank the state of Connecticut's Department of Environmental and Energy Protection for giving us some guidance, occasionally pushing us, and giving us this financial support through the Clean Water Funds, which make this all possible for us. And lastly, to thank our town government, which is the Selectman's office. Our first Selectman, Bonnie Reedsider, is here today. Without her guidance in her office, we probably wouldn't have made this possible. I think she initiated the initial task force that we started in 2012, 2013, reforming the WPCA, which at that time only had one member. As you can see from the history, we went to develop a number of options, and we chose an option that we thought was really nice and good for our town, and later it turned out that it was not feasible or practical. We got an administration order push from the state of Connecticut in 2015 that clarified our focus, went back to work, and we also got a public nuisance from our health director identifying a problem. 2017, 2018, we did a lot of work and created basically all the things we needed to do to go to referendum, and this past summer in 2019, we put together a referendum, and you'll see the results later. So the summary of needs, I'm not going to go through all these slides, all the details of it. I think you can read some of them, and I'll try and focus on what I think might be interesting. For our town, for our area, we have a wide range of landscapes. But the project area that I'm talking about had essentially 20-foot setback needs on 40-foot wide lots. Houses next to houses next to houses, along with shallow groundwater, poorly drained soils. And the next slide, I think, may also help explain the need. I hope you can see the green section and the yellow section. There's a red line down the middle. That's the town's project area. I should say that there are 5 essential boroughs or WPCAs in the town of Lyme. One, Point of Woods, was done in 2008, but the property to the left of that green section is Miami Beach Association, and the properties to the right are Old Colony and Old Lyme Shores. These are private beach associations with a unique status of a quasi-government agency. They're allowed to assess taxes on their membership, and they basically become or act like a borough of Old Lyme, where they have formed their own WPCA, and they are putting sewers in on their own. So their property conditions are similar as far as density and soil conditions. So the project area would be completely surrounded by sewered properties, which makes it another reason why the town said, well, we have to be responsible, we have to go forward and consider establishing sewers in that area. There are other sections of the town that are on, let's say, a lower need or a further study, but I'm just going to focus on this at this point. So we had a couple different options of how to do this, and we ended up with the most reliable option and probably feasible and hopefully economical is to create a pump station locally and pump it from the lower left side where Old Lyme through the neighboring towns of East Lyme and Waterford to New London for treatment. And you can imagine this kind of raises the complexity level of the whole project, or at least I think. So now we have a lot of entities that we have to agree with. So these private beach associations further along have developed what's called intermunicipal agreements with the neighboring towns. And when they did that, the state reminded them to include the volume for our project, which would likely occur, and I'm really glad they did. So we have these intermunicipal agreements that are established that need to be amended. And the town is working with these private beach associations to join them with what they call a cost-sharing agreement. And as the name describes, it saves a lot of money to have the same force main and the same pump station handle all the volume in an area that's all one big neighborhood, versus the alternative of 2 pump stations and 2 pipes next to each other. The intention for the town is to develop a ownership of that cost-sharing agreement where we would own a % of that, and that is all derived or agreed to by the volume, and the volume equates to how much we'll use of the equipment in the force main. So we don't know the exact volume, so it's based on the design volume, and this kind of helped us figure out what the cost would be, so when we go to the referendum we could explain it. So the total of our project, 9.5 million, may not seem like a lot to some districts, but it's a lot to us. After the Clean Water Fund's grants, our cost estimated to be 7.44 million. We definitely need the Clean Water Funds. We're definitely putting ourselves back on the priority list, or request to go back on the priority list, George. The document should be going in. I think where Jay is, maybe he can give an update later. Related to our projects is updating some ancient water lines. And it's not actually part of our projects, but the local residents don't see it that way. They see it one and the same, and everyone here probably knows it's not. So we worked with Connecticut Water Company, and they were willing to change their priority list of what to repair and upgrade. And we have some savings of repaving the road once, final, after everything's opened and closed. They're planning on doing that in 2020, so we're trying to catch up with them so they could so we could get this efficiency. The other parts of this slide that you can see the typical cost components of collection, transmission, and the conveyance of East Lyme and Waterford through New London. All this costs, we had to kind of develop some kind of scheme or direction of how the local resident would impact them. So there's many different methods of cost recovery, and our landscape is different than the private beach associations adjacent to our project. We have houses that are 200 square feet size, and one house that's 6,500 square feet in size. We have commercial properties. We have a church. We have a community center. We have an ice cream stand with bathrooms, an ice cream stand without bathrooms. We have restaurants. We have a carousel. So how do you figure that one out? So what we did is the typical homeowner or resident in that town, we kind of brought it into a scale where basically it's based on the size of the building. We do have good information on the size of the building. We do not have good information on other attributes of the building. So we have 2 examples here. 200 to 700 square foot building has a benefit or betterment assessment of $21,000 per year. And the typical average house of 1,200 square feet has a $31,000 betterment assessment. It goes up from there. And even though we've agreed to this, and it seems like a good method, We still get complaints, and I think anyone that has lived through this knows there's no way you're going to please everyone. And it's ironic that some people that are complaining that some of the higher properties are getting billed too much didn't realize that if we reduce their cost, the cost doesn't go away. It goes to someone else. But we felt it was really important to go through the sewer meeting to have a referendum and explain this cost for people to vote on. So part of the key parts of our sewer referendum planning is, one is we could have done a town meeting, which could have been seen as some kind of secret meeting that no one knew about and voted, and the residents would be upset. And we didn't want to have that perception, even though that's not true. So we had a referendum. It cost a lot more. It was a lot more planning, a lot more work. But it was the right thing to do to give everyone a chance to vote that was impacted. We also had to explain how this is a town-wide referendum, not the residents affected, because the town is taking on the bond to the debt to fund this project, but those properties that are going to be benefited would get a benefit assessment. We had a question and answer session at our Midsummer Festival, which is the big deal in Old Lyme in the summer. We had 4 Q&A sessions with the public. The first 2 went really well. We had both people for it and against it ask good questions. We had people from outside the town that were against it and arguing not to put sewers in, which is a little strange. And the last 2 Q&A sessions was really difficult. We had a number of residents that were very loud and voiceful, and some of them were for it in the past, but then they figured out how much it'll cost them, maybe. I'm not sure what changed their mind. They were really against it, and some of them kind of gave their opinion, which wasn't necessarily the facts of the case. We also developed a frequently asked questions, and the Q&A session PowerPoints, project descriptions, put it all on our website. Interview with local and regional papers. We did direct mail and a news article referendum notice. And then we had the referendum August 13th. And as you can see from the results, 883 yes votes to 565 no votes. Now that's 123 buildings that were affected. Some of those buildings have multiple residents. Some of those, even small properties, have multiple owners. And then the whole town was allowed to vote. So for us, I think that's a pretty good turnout for this subject. We had it during the summer, so everyone was there. So overall, it wasn't an easy vote, but it clearly said what we were. That the people spoke and said that they agreed with the referendum to go forward. Last slide. So our major to-do list, there's probably a lot more, but submit the design to the state for approval. They're working on that. It should be ready any day. Request to be put back on the Clean Water Fund's priority list. Sign the cost-sharing agreement with the private beach associations, and amend or create new intermunicipal agreements with neighboring towns. Review our sewer ordinance to make sure it's in compliance with the state requirements and the bond requirements. Update our costs and finalize our sewer assessments in special cases. Work towards submitting our construction plan. All this coordinating with the private beach associations where we need to, and all the other different agencies within the town that we need to. So for that, that's my update. And thank you.